The Secret and Origin of Gandalf's Power. Part 1. The Maiar and the Timeless Halls. Before Middle-earth existed, before the sun and moon were kindled, before even the great music that shaped creation, there were the Ainur, the Holy Ones, spirits born from the thought of Ilúvatar, the one God. Among these divine beings were the Valar, the mightiest powers who would shape and govern the world, and the Maiar, their servants and followers, lesser in power but no less sacred in origin. In those timeless halls beyond the circles of the world, one spirit dwelt in the gardens of Olórin and the halls of Nienna. His name was Olórin, which in the tongue of the elves means dream or vision. Unlike many of his fellow Maiar who concerned themselves with grand displays of power or the shaping of mountains and seas, Olórin was different. He walked unseen among the elves when they first awoke, whispering wisdom into their hearts. He learned from Nienna, the Vala of grief and compassion, who taught him pity and endurance in the face of suffering. This is crucial to understanding what made Olórin unique among all the Maiar. While others like Sauron and Saruman were drawn to the power of Aule the smith, learning craft and domination over matter, Olórin learned something far more subtle and ultimately more powerful. He learned to understand suffering, to have patience with the failings of others, and to see hope where others saw only darkness. The Valar knew that Olórin was wisest of the Maiar. Even Manwë, the elder king himself, held Olórin in high regard. But Olórin was also humble, perhaps too humble. He feared going to Middle-earth. He did not think himself strong or wise enough for the task that would be set before him. This very doubt, this humility was what made him perfect for the mission. When the shadow of Sauron began to grow once more in the Third Age, the Valar held a council. They would not intervene directly. The mistakes of the First Age had taught them that overwhelming power often brought more harm than good. Instead, they would send emissaries, the Istari, disguised as old men, their power deliberately diminished and their memories clouded. They would guide and counsel, but not dominate or rule. 5 Maiar were chosen. Curumu, servant of Aule, who would become Saruman the White. Iwendil, who loved birds and beasts, who would be Radagast the Brown. 2 others whose names are barely remembered, Alatar and Palando, the Blue Wizards, who went into the distant east. And finally, reluctantly, Olórin agreed to go. He would become Gandalf, though he had many names: Mithrandir to the elves, Tharkun to the dwarves, Incanus in the south, and Gandalf the Grey to men and hobbits. Part 2. The nature of the Istari's power. To understand Gandalf's true power, we must understand what the Istari actually were and what they were forbidden to do. The wizards were not merely powerful sorcerers or wise old men with magic staffs. They were Maiar, immortal spirits who had existed since before the world began, who had witnessed the very creation of Arda through the great music. But they came to Middle-earth under strict limitations. The Valar deliberately crippled their power and clothed them in the bodies of old men. They would age slowly, feel hunger and weariness, and even pain. Most importantly, they were forbidden from matching Sauron's power with power, from seeking to dominate the wills of elves and men, even for good purposes. They could only advise and encourage. The free peoples had to choose their own path. Imagine the frustration. You are an immortal spirit who helped shape the world, who possesses knowledge of the deep magic woven into creation itself, but you must convince stubborn kings and frightened villagers through patience and wisdom rather than simply commanding them or overwhelming them with displays of might. Saruman chafed under these restrictions. He was of the people of Aule, concerned with craft, with power, with order, and dominion over matter. He looked at the chaos and weakness of Middle-earth and thought he could bring order through control. Over time, he grew to envy Sauron's power, to desire the ring for himself, believing he could use it wisely where others had failed. His very strength, his brilliance, his organizational ability, his mastery of lore became his weakness, because he trusted too much in his own wisdom. Radagast became distracted, too concerned with the beasts and growing things, losing sight of the mission to unite the peoples against Sauron. But Gandalf, Olórin who learned from Nienna, understood something the others did not. True power is not domination, but inspiration. He did not need to control Frodo to convince him to take the ring. He needed to show him compassion and trust, to believe in him when no one else would. He did not command Theoden. He awakened what was already sleeping in the king's heart. This is the secret wisdom Olórin brought from the timeless halls, that the greatest power is not to control, but to kindle courage in others. The Valar had sent him precisely because he feared his own insufficiency, because he would never trust in his own power alone, because he would always look for the strength in others rather than imposing his own will. Gandalf's magic, when he did use it, was purposeful and limited. He kindled lights, set fires, broke bridges, held doors, practical magic for practical problems. His greatest feats came not from raw power, but from deep knowledge. He knew the spells of opening and closing. He could speak to beasts and read ancient tongues. He understood the history and lineages of all the peoples. Most importantly, he recognized the ring as what it was, even when the wise Saruman was deceived. Part 3. The Student of Nienna. Compassion as Power. The relationship between Olórin and Nienna, the Compassionate, is perhaps the most important key to understanding why Gandalf became the greatest of the Istari. Nienna dwells alone, and she is acquainted with grief beyond measure. She mourns for every wound that Arda has suffered, for all the marring of Melkor, for all the evil and suffering in the world. But her grief is not hopeless.
Those who listen to her learn endurance, pity, and hope beyond the circles of the world. Olórin was wisest of the Maiar because he learned from Nienna, while Sauron studied the rings of power and the arts of the enemy to better combat them, and in so doing became fascinated by them. Gandalf studied the hearts of those who suffer and endure. He learned to see the value in small, humble things. He learned that the greatest strength often comes not from the mighty, but from the meek, who simply refuse to give in to despair. This is why Gandalf loved the hobbits, creatures that Sauron dismissed as insignificant. Gandalf saw in them something precious. They were not easily corrupted because...
Part 4. Death, Transformation, and Return. The confrontation with the Balrog at the bridge of Khazad-dûm represents the pivotal moment in Gandalf's mission to Middle-earth, and what happened next reveals the true extent of his nature and purpose. When Gandalf faced the Balrog, itself a corrupted Maiar, a spirit of fire from the ancient days who had followed Morgoth into darkness, he was facing a being of similar origin to himself. The Balrog had no restrictions on its power. It could be as terrible as its nature allowed. But Gandalf was still bound by his limitations, still clothed in the flesh of an old man, still forbidden from using his full might. Yet he stood. "You cannot pass," he declared, not because he was certain he could win, but because someone had to stand, and he was the only one who could match this ancient evil. The bridge broke, the Balrog fell, but its whip caught Gandalf and dragged him down into the abyss. What followed was a battle that raged from the depths of the earth to the peaks of the mountains. Gandalf pursued the Balrog through the endless stair, fighting all the way, until they emerged at the pinnacle of Zirak-Zigil, the highest peak above Moria. There, on a narrow platform of ice and stone surrounded by clouds, Gandalf threw down his enemy. But the effort broke more than just the Balrog. It broke Gandalf's body. He died. This is not a minor point. Gandalf the Grey actually died. His spirit departed from his body. But this was no ordinary death of a mortal being. When Maiar die in physical form, their spirits can return to the Undying Lands, to Valinor. Gandalf's spirit went there, beyond the circles of the world, beyond the reach of time. And there, something unprecedented happened. The Valar, perhaps Manwë himself, sent Gandalf back. Not as Gandalf the Grey, but as transformed, enhanced, as Gandalf the White. The restrictions were loosened. The power that had been veiled was now allowed to shine more clearly. He was given Saruman's place, the head of the White Council and the Order of Istari, because Saruman had failed in his mission. But here's the crucial detail that many miss. Gandalf the White was not simply more powerful in raw magical might. He was still forbidden from dominating the wills of others or matching Sauron power for power. What changed was his authority and his clarity of purpose. The veils of memory that had clouded his mission were lifted. He remembered more clearly who and what he was. His authority to speak and command was enhanced. When he cast out Saruman from Theoden, he was acting with the full authority of the Valar themselves. Gandalf describes his return.
Naked I was sent back, for that time was near, and I lay cold and dead in the mountain top, and I was there until the eagles found me. 3 days I lay there, and then came the eagles and carried me away. The parallel to other resurrection narratives is intentional but distinct. Tolkien, a devout Catholic, was creating a myth that echoed deeper truths without directly allegorizing them. The transformation also marked a shift in Gandalf's approach. As the Grey, he had been patient, encouraging, willing to step back and let others lead. As the White, he became more commanding, more urgent. Time was shortening. The final battle was approaching. He had earned the right to speak with greater authority because he had paid the ultimate price. Yet, even enhanced, even returned from death itself, Gandalf remained true to Nienna's teaching. He did not become domineering or proud. When Aragorn suggested that Gandalf should take the ring, Gandalf refused with even greater horror than before, knowing now from beyond death itself how catastrophic such a choice would be. He remained the servant, not the master. Part 5. Why Gandalf was the most powerful. Now we can finally answer the central question. Why was Gandalf, seemingly the least of the Istari, actually the most powerful? It wasn't because he had the strongest magic. Saruman was called the wisest in the lore of the Elven Rings, and his voice could bend wills. It wasn't because he was the most knowledgeable of Middle-earth. Saruman had delved deeper into ancient texts and forgotten secrets. It wasn't even because he was enhanced after his resurrection. Even as Gandalf the Grey, before Moria, he was already proving more effective than Saruman had been in centuries. Gandalf was most powerful because he understood the true nature of power itself. He knew, as the others did not, that in Tolkien's universe, which reflects Tolkien's deep Catholic philosophy, power is not morally neutral. The more you grasp it for it, the more it corrupts you. The more you trust in your own strength, the weaker you actually become. This is the paradox that Sauron never understood, that Saruman learned too late, but that Gandalf knew from the beginning because Nienna had taught him. Saruman fell because he was powerful and knew it. He trusted in his own wisdom, his own strength, his own ability to control and master. He looked at the ring and thought, "I could use this wisely." That very thought was his downfall, because the ring cannot be used wisely. It can only corrupt. The stronger you are, the more attractive the ring becomes, and the more catastrophic your fall will be. Gandalf was powerful because he was humble. He knew his limits. He feared his own weakness. This fear, this humility, was not a flaw, but his greatest strength. When he was offered the ring, he refused in terror, saying, "Do not tempt me, for I do not wish to become like the Dark Lord himself. Yet the way of the ring to my heart is by pity, pity for weakness and the desire of strength to do good. Do not tempt me." Notice what he says. The ring would tempt him through compassion, through his desire to help, to make things right, to use power for good. He knows himself well enough to know he would rationalize taking it, and he knows that this would be the end of everything he stands for. This self-knowledge, this willingness to acknowledge his own pretension for corruption, is what makes him incorruptible. His power lay in his relationships. He inspired Frodo and Sam to carry on when all hope seemed lost. He awakened Theoden from despair and cowardice. He reminded Denethor, though unsuccessfully, that even in death there can be honor. He befriended hobbits whom others dismissed. He trusted Aragorn to claim his destiny. He worked alongside Galadriel and Elrond, respecting their wisdom. Even the great eagles answered his call because he had earned their friendship, not their subservience. This is the secret of Olórin's power. He multiplied his strength through others, while Saruman hoarded knowledge and power, trying to accomplish everything through his own might. Gandalf scattered seeds of courage and hope in 1,000 hearts. Every person he inspired became an extension of his will, not through domination, but through freely given love and loyalty. When Gandalf stood at the Black Gate and challenged the might of Mordor, he was not standing alone. He stood with the cumulative strength of everyone he had inspired, everyone he had believed in, everyone he had saved. Frodo was carrying the ring to Mount Doom at that very moment, not because Gandalf forced him, but because Gandalf had shown him that a small person could make a difference, that humble courage could achieve what great power could not. In the end, Gandalf was the most powerful of the Istari because he fulfilled his mission completely. He united the free peoples. He ensured the ring was destroyed. He prepared the way for the age of men. And he did it all without ever grasping for personal power, without ever betraying his nature as a servant,
without ever betraying his nature, without ever forgetting the lessons of Nienna. After Sauron's fall, after the crowning of Aragorn, Gandalf's task was complete. He sailed into the west with the ring-bearers, returning at last to the Undying Lands from which he had come. His last words to the hobbits were characteristic. "I will not say, 'Do not weep,' for not all tears are in evil." Even in victory, even in farewell, he remembered Nienna's teaching about the value of grief and the necessity of hope beyond sorrow. Olórin the Maiar, Gandalf the wizard, the servant of the secret fire and wielder of the flame of Anor, was powerful not in spite of his humility and compassion, but because of them. In a world where power corrupts, only the one who fears power can be trusted with it. Only the one who mourns with the suffering can bring hope to the hopeless. Only the servant can become the true master. That is the secret and origin of Gandalf's power.